Hari Om. Having adored Narayana and Nara, the best of all beings, plus the goddess Saraswati, and then Vyasa, let them utter the verse of victory. May Vishnu's lotus feet, which power has to dissipate the woes wrought by the fear of existence, and which are lauded high by ascetics, assiduous, whose minds from all things else are rapt, may those same feet whose steps on the earth, the sky, and heaven overpassed, to sight appearing, purify our souls. May they protect us, who are skilled to save in every kind of sin impure, whose form So I wanted to get to a story before the sun sets today, and just kind of get this started, because it's a long story. It's a long book known as the Markandey Puran, and it's one of the only, if not the only, Purana, which literally means ancient. So it's an ancient book, epic poem, oral teaching, and it's one of the only Puranas that was written by someone other than Vyas, according to the tradition and the authorship. The illustrious Jaimini, the disciple of Vyasa, interrogated the great Muni Markandey, who was engaged in the performance of austerities and the study of the Veda. O sir, the high-souled Vyasa related the story of Mahabharata, which is replete with splendid spotless collections of various shastras, which is characterized by accuracy regarding the different classes, is embellished with beautiful words, and contains complete knowledge of established conclusions about reality. As Vishnu is chief among the gods, as the Brahmana chief among people, and as the crest jewel chief among all decorations, as the axe is the best among weapons, or Indra's thunderbolt translation, as the mind best among the organs, so in this world is the Mahabharata the best among all the shastras. Here are described both wealth and virtue, love and final emancipation from transmigration. These have both reciprocal and peculiar consequences. It is the best Dharma Shastra, it is the most eminent Artha Shastra. It too is the foremost Kama Shastra, as well as the noblest Moksha Shastra. So it just went through Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. There. Dharma, the doing. Artha, I need to remind myself of Kama, desire, moksha, liberation. It has been declared by Vedavyas, the wise, to be the authority for the sacred and maxims of the laws of the 4 periods of a Brahman's life. For this Mahashastra has to be has been so constructed by Vyas the noble in deeds that although beset with difficulties, it is not overthrown by them. The earth has been freed from the dust of the passion of the stream of Vyas's words, which has descended from the mountain of the Ved and has swept away the trees of bad reasoning. Therefore, have I come to you, sir, being desirous to know truly the story of Vyas, in which melodious sounds are the geese, the noble story is the splendid lotus, the words are the expanse of water, and the Vedas are the great lake, this precious and long story of the Mahabharata. Why was Janardhan Vasudeva, who is the cause of the creation, preservation, and destruction of the world, although devoid of qualities, endued with humanity? And why was Draupada's daughter, Krishna, the common wife of the 5 sons of Pandu? For on this point we feel great perplexity. Why did the mighty Baladev Halayudha expiate the Brahmanicide by engaging in a pilgrimage? And how was it that the unmarried, heroic, high-souled sons of Draupadi, whose protector was Pandu, were slain as if they had no protector? Deign to recount all this to us here at length, for sages like you are ever the instructors of the ignorant. Having thus heard this speech, the great Manu, Markandey, devoid of the 18 defects, began to speak. The 18 defects are said in a translation begun by the late Reverend K.M. Banerjee to be these: palpitation, fear, thickness in speech, indistinctness, speaking through the nose, discordancy, want of emotion, disconnectedness, roughness, hoarseness, high pitch, inaccuracy in pronunciation, perturbation, want of cadence, sing-song, shaking the head, weakness of voice, and unmeaningness. Markandeya spoke. The time for my engaging in religious rites has now arrived, most virtuous Muni, and this is not esteemed for the season for a long discourse, but I will now tell you, O Jamini, of those birds who will speak to you and so resolve your doubts. They are Pingaksha and Vibodha, Supatra and Sumukha, the sons of Drona, the noblest of birds, versed in the principles of philosophy and meditators on the Shastras. Their mind is unclouded in the knowledge of the meaning of the Ved and Shastras. They dwell in a cave of the Vindhya mountains. Visit and question them. Then, thus addressed by the wise Markandey, replied the Muni, preeminent, his eyes wide open with astonishment. Jamini spoke. Very wonderful is this, O Brahmin, that those birds have gained knowledge most difficult to be acquired, as if birds possessed human speech. If their birth is of the brute creation, whence have they the knowledge? And how is it that those winged ones are called the children of Drona? And who is this famous Drona who had those 4 sons? Do those virtuous, high-souled birds possess the knowledge of righteousness? Markandeya spoke. Listen attentively to what happened of yore in Nandan at the meeting of Indra and the Apsarases and Narada. Narada Muni saw Indra, the king of the gods, in Nandan, surrounded by a band of those wanton maidens, with eyes fastened on their faces. Sachi's lord, immediately he was seen by that best of rishis, rose up and respectfully gave him his own seat. Those heavenly maidens, on seeing him, the slayer of Bala and Vritra, rise up, prostrated themselves before the Devarishi, and stood reverently bending. He then worshipped by them, duly greeted Indra when he had seated himself, and conversed pleasantly with them. And in the course of their talk, Indra said to the great Muni, Indra said, "Declare which of these dancers pleases you most. Is it Rambha, Karaksha, Urvashi, Tilotama, Kritachi, Menaka, or whichever delights you?" Narada, best of the Dvijas, hearing this speech of Indra, pondered, and then addressed the reverently bending Apsarases. "She of you all here present, who thinks herself preeminent in beauty, nobility, and good qualities, let her dance before me. There is indeed no success in dancing for one who is destitute of good qualities and beauty. Good dancing implies graceful comportment. Other dancing is vexation." Markandey spoke, and immediately on that speech each one of those bowing ones thus exclaimed, "I excel in good qualities. Not you nor you." The Lord Indra, seeing their agitation, said, "Let the Muni be asked. He will say which of you excels in good qualities." What Narada sought by those followers of Indra's will, then said, "Hear that from me." Narada said, "O Jaimini, she among you who by her power perturbs the most noble Muni, Durvasas, who is performing austerities, dwelling on the mountain, her among you I deem preeminent in good qualities." Markandeya spoke, having heard his sentence, having heard him spoke, they all exclaimed with trembling necks, "This is impossible for us." Among them an Apsarasa named Vapu, confident of perturbing the Muni, replied, "I'll follow where the Muni dwells. Now will I make that tamer of his body, who has yoked the horses of his organs, but a poor charioteer whose reins drop before the weapons of love. Whatever it be, Brahma or Janardhan or the purple Shiv, his heart will I now pierce with the arrow of love." Having thus spoken, Vapu departed then to the snowy mountain, to the Muni's hermitage, where the beasts of prey were quelled by the might of his austerities. Stopping in the distance of a call from where the great Muni is seated, the lovely Apsaras sang the cuckoo's melody. Hearing the strains of her song, the Muni, astonished in mind, went to where sits that beauteous-faced maiden. On seeing her, beautiful in every limb, the Muni, summoning his resolution, was filled with anger and resentment, knowing that she had come to perturb him. Then the great Rishi, the performer of mighty austerities, pronounced this sentence: "Since you have come here, O maiden, intoxicated with pride, to cause me pain by obstructing my austerities, which are accomplished with difficulty, O Apsaras, therefore shall you, polluted by my wrath, be born in the foolish race of birds for the space of 16 years, losing your own form and taking the form of a bird. And 4 sons shall be born to you, O vilest of Apsarases, and without having gained affection among them, absolved from guilt by dying in the field of battle, you shall regain your dwelling in the sky. Never make any reply." The Brahmin, red-eyed with anger, having pronounced this grievous sentence, on that proud maiden, whose tinkling bracelets were trembling, abandoned the earth, whose waves were very tremulous, and departed to the heavenly Ganges, whose stream consists of a multitude of renowned qualities. Chapter 2. The Birth of the Sparrows. The story of the birds continues. Gandhar, king of the birds, killed a Rakshasa, Vidyudrup, for killing his brother and marrying the Rakshasa's wife, had a daughter by her named Tarkshi. I think it's a R. Might be an I. Tarkshi, who was the Apsaras Vapu. She married Dron. When pregnant by him, she was killed at the battle of the Kauravas and Pandavas. And there laid 4 eggs from which the 4 birds were born. The birds were nourished by the Muni Samika. Markandey spoke. The king of the birds, Garuda by name, was the son of Aristanemi. Garuda's son was renowned as Sampati, and his son was Suparshva, heroic, mighty as Vayu. Suparshva's son was Kunti. Kunti's son was Pralolupa. Again, I think that's an R. It's printed a little. It's old. It's an old book. And he had 2 sons, Kanka and Gandhara, on the top at Kailasa. Kanka saw the Rakshasa tamed as Vidyudrup, whose eyes were like a lotus leaf, a follower of Kubera, who was busied in a banquet, clad with strings of bright garlands, sitting in company with his wife on a beautiful, clean, rocky seat. Then the Rakshasa, immediately he was seen by Kanka, filled with anger, said, "Wherefore have you come hither, O vilest of the egg-born? Why have you approached me when I am in company with my wife? Such is not the rule of the wise in matters that must be accomplished in secret." Kanka spoke. "This mountain is common both to you and me, and to other creatures also. What special ownership, then, can you, sir, have here?" Markandeya spoke. The Rakshasa, with his sword, slew Kanka while he was thus speaking, who fell, defiled with the steaming blood, quivering and senseless. Having heard that Kanka was slain, Gandhara, the king of the birds, bewildered with anger, resolved speedily to slay Vidyudrupa. Having gone to the mountain top where Kanka lay slain, the king of the birds, his eyes swollen with anger and resentment, sighing like the king of the Nagas, performed the Sankalana for his elder brother. Where sits the slayer of his brother? There he went, rocking the lofty mountains with the mighty wind from his wings. He with blood-red eyes, overtopping the mountains and forcibly hurling down masses of clouds with his wings, used to destroy his enemies suddenly. There he saw that demon, whose thoughts were intent on drinking, whose face and eyes were of a copperish color, and who was seated on a golden conch, whose crest was covered with strings of garlands, who was adorned with yellow sandal, whose face was very horrible, with teeth that resembled the inside of a ketaki leaf. And he saw, seated on the Rakshasa's left thigh, his long-eyed wife named Madanika, whose voice was soft as the cuckoo's. And then Gandhara, whose mind was filled with wrath, addressed that inmate of the cave. "O you of utterly evil soul, come forth and fight with me, since you have murdered my trustful elder brother. Therefore I will bring you, while engrossed in drunkenness, down to Yama's abode. Today, slain by me, shall you go to all those hells that are the abodes of the murderers of those who trust in them, and of the murderers of women and children." Markandeya spoke. Addressed even thus by the king of the birds in his wife's presence, the Rakshasa, filled with anger, then answered the bird, "If your brother has been slain, then have I displayed my valor. You too today will I slay with this sword, O bird. Stay a moment, you shall not move here alive, O vilest of birds." Thus he spoke and seized his bright sword that resembled a mass of collyrium. Then took place a marvelous battle between the king of the birds and Kuber's warrior, such as between Garuda and Indra. Then the Rakshasa, in anger, swiftly hurling his sword, black as charcoal, flung it against the king of the birds, and then the king of the birds, slightly springing up from the ground, seized it with his beak, as Garuda seizes a serpent, and the egg-born one broke it with his beak and talons and shook it. Thereupon, the sword being broken, they began to fight with their arms. Then the Rakshasa, being attacked in the breast by the king of the birds, was speedily deprived of arms, feet, hands, and head. When he was killed, his wife besought protection of the bird. Somewhat fearful, she said, "I am your wife." That noble of birds, taking her, returned to his abode, having obtained a recompense for his brother by the slaughter of Vidyudrupa. And she, the daughter of Menaka, with beautiful eyebrows, capable of assuming forms at pleasure, on reaching the house of Gandhara, took a form of resembling Garuda's. Of her he then begat a daughter named Tarikshi, namely Vapu, the loveliest of the Apsarases, who was consumed by the fire of the Muni's curse. Then the bird gave her the name Tarikshi. And Mandapal had 4 sons of boundless intellect. Mandapala had 4 sons of boundless intellect. Jaritari, the eldest, and Drona, the youngest, best of the Dvijas. The youngest of them, righteous in soul, thoroughly read in the Vedas and Vedangas, married her, the beauteous Tarikshi, with the consent of Gandhara. And after a while, Tarikshi conceived. When she had gone 7 fortnights in her pregnancy, she went to Kurukshetra, the very terrible battle between the Kurus and Pandavas was then being fought, and in consequence of her action being predestined, she entered into the battle. There, then, she beheld the contest between Bhagadat and Arjun. The sky was thick, filled with arrows, as if with locusts discharged from the bow of Arjun. An arrow black as a serpent fell with great force and pierced the skin of her belly. Her belly being pierced, 4 moon-like eggs fell on the ground as if on a heap of cotton, from the fact that their allotted period of life was not ended. At the same time that they fell the great hell. The cord bell. At the same time that they fell the great bell, the cord of which was cut by an arrow from the noble elephant, Supratika. It reached the ground evenly all around, cutting into the surface of the ground and covering the eggs of the bird which lay upon flesh. And after King Bhagadatta, ruler of men, was slain, the fight between the armies of the Kurus and Pandavas went on for many days. At the end of the battle, when Dharma's son Yudhishthira approached the son of Shantanu to hear the high-souled Bhishma proclaiming the entire laws, a sage named Shamika came to the spot where, O best of Dvijas, lay the eggs within the bell. There he heard the voice of the little birds chirping, whose voices were inarticulate on account of their infancy. Although they had transcendent knowledge, then the Rishi, accompanied by his disciples, lifted up the bell and saw with surprise the young motherless and fatherless birds. The venerable Muni, Shamika, having so seen them on the ground there, filled with astonishment, addressed his attendant Dvijas. Well was it said by the chief of the Dvijas, Ushanas himself, the regent of the planet Venus, when he saw the army of the Daityas intent on fleeing, hard pressed by the gods, "You must not go, turn your back, why run away, you feeble ones? Abandoning valor and glory, where have you gone? You shall not perish. Whether one perishes or whether one fights, one possesses life as long as God originally created, not as long as one's mind desires. Men perish, some in their homes, some in flight. So too do they meet their death when eating food and drinking water. So too others when sporting themselves, seated in the chariot of love, free from sickness, their bodies unpierced by arrows, fall into the power of the king of the departed. Others, when intent on austerities, are led off by the servants of the king of the departed, and others occupied in meditation and study have not gained immortality. Of yore, Indra hurled his thunderbolt against Shambhara, yet that demon, though pierced thereby to the heart, did not perish. By that very thunderbolt indeed, and by the same Indra, when their time was come, the Danavas were slain, the Daityas forthwith perished. Perceiving this, you should not fear. Return you, then, those Daityas, abandoning the fear of death, turned back. Perceiving this, you should not fear. Return. Then those Daityas, abandoning the fear of death, turned back. This speech of Ushanas is proved true by these most noble birds, which even in the superhuman battle did not meet with destruction. Whence comes the laying of the eggs, O Brahmanas? Whence comes the even fall of the bell? And how did it come to be that the ground is covered with flesh, fat, and blood? Certainly, these must be some Brahmanas. They are not ordinary birds. The favor of destiny shows great good fortune in the world. Having spoken thus, he looked at them and spoke again. Return, go to the hermitage, taking the young birds with you. Where these egg-born may have no fear of cat or rat, hawk or other, let the birds be there placed. O Dvijas, what is the use of great care? All creatures are destroyed or preserved by their own actions, as have been these young. Nevertheless, men must exert themselves in all matters. They who do the right act gain commendation from the good. Thus, urged by that illustrious Muni, those young Munis, taking those birds, went then to their own hermitage, delightful to ascetics, where clusters of bees settled on the thoughts of the tree, where clusters of bees settled on the boughs of the trees, and he, the noblest of Dvijas, gathering wild roots, flowers, fruits, grasses, such as his mind loved, performed the various religious ceremonies ordained by the Veda to all the deities, to Vishnu, Rudra, and the Creator, to Indra, Yama, and Agni, Varuna, Brihaspati, Kuber, also to Vayu, Dhatri, and Vidhatri. So that's all the time I have for today. Next time we'll go on to chapter 3.